When I got married, I never mentioned that I'd inherited 3 apartments from my grandmother. Thank God I stayed quiet, because just a week later, my mother-in-law showed up with a notary. Can you imagine the shock? Just 1 week after marrying the love of my life, my new mother-in-law showed up at our doorstep with a notary in tow, demanding I sign a prenup. A prenup. It felt like a calculated ambush, designed to expose a secret I'd been desperately trying to keep hidden. My heart hammered in my chest. What the hell was happening? So, there I was, still basking in that newlywed glow, when our doorbell practically exploded. I was in the kitchen, drying my hands, and I remember thinking, who on earth is knocking this early? Even though it was already 10 a.m. But you know those first few days after a wedding? Every morning feels like a gentle, romantic haze. Nathan and I had been staying up late, just talking, watching movies, enjoying those sweet, quiet evenings. Before I could even get the door fully open, my mother-in-law, Margaret Thompson, was already standing there. And let me tell you, she was fully armed. Perfect hair, a sharp pantsuit, and that look on her face that just screamed, I mean business. Right beside her stood this short, uncomfortable-looking man, staring at the floor, clutching a leather briefcase. From his neatly combed hair and formal jacket, it was obvious. He was a notary. Or some kind of lawyer. "Victoria, hello dear," Margaret announced, her tone leaving absolutely no room for discussion. "We need to talk. This is Samuel Wilson, a notary and a family friend." I decided it's time to sort out a few things. My heart sank. What could she possibly want to sort out a week after the wedding? Anxiety twisted in my stomach. I still hadn't told anyone about the inheritance, 3 apartments in different parts of the city, all from my grandmother. It wasn't because I was greedy, no. I just hated it when people started digging into your finances, and more than anything, I didn't want my relationship with Nathan to be influenced by real estate. I wanted him to love me, for me, not for the square footage. "Good morning, Margaret," I said, forcing a cheerful smile, letting them into the apartment Nathan and I now shared. "Come in, Samuel. Nice to meet you." I tried to stay calm, but my nerves were already on edge. A terrifying thought flashed through my mind. Was she here to make me sign something? A promissory note? A prenup? It had only been 7 days since the wedding. As soon as they stepped inside, Margaret acted like she owned the place, glancing around to check if everything was in order. Then she gave this sharp wave, like, "Come on, Victoria, seat the guest." Remembering my manners, I invited them to the living room and offered them a seat. I darted to the kitchen to make tea and bring out some cookies, even though I wasn't exactly thrilled to be serving them. But basic hospitality still mattered. "Victoria, where's Nathan?" Margaret asked as she settled on the couch. I asked him to be home. Nathan had to step out. I lied a little. He'd actually just gone to the store and promised to be back in 20 minutes. I just needed time to figure out why she'd brought a notary into my living room. While I poured the tea, Margaret, of course, couldn't resist. "Things still aren't quite in order here. Young couples never understand how to keep a proper home. But we'll fix that later." I pretended not to hear her comment, gave her a tight smile, and set her cup down. "Victoria," she said, her tone suddenly formal. "Nathan's father and I thought that now that you're part of the family, it's time to take care of some paperwork. You are married now, yes?" "Yes. We just want to avoid any future issues regarding property." She motioned to the notary, who looked like he was afraid to sink into the sofa. "Samuel has prepared some documents. We believe it's important to be fair and transparent." I tensed up. This sounded like they wanted me to sign something right here, right now. "What kind of documents, Margaret? What exactly are we talking about?" I asked, trying to sound as innocent as possible. "Oh, nothing major," she said casually. "Just a prenuptial agreement. And a note confirming that if something ever happens, any property gained during the marriage will be split evenly. We also wanted to clarify, just to be sure, that you didn't have any significant assets before the wedding." My heart tightened into a knot. There it is, I thought. She's fishing. But I was ready for this. I'd suspected from the start that she wouldn't be able to resist poking around in my private life. "Oh, assets?" I smiled. "Well, I saved a bit for the wedding. Have a few small savings. Nothing major, really." "I see," she replied, and I could tell from her face she either didn't believe me or thought I was hiding something. "And what about property? Did you own anything before the marriage?" "You people are really nosy," I almost said out loud. But I just shook my head gently. "No, nothing serious. I used to live with my grandmother, that's all. But she passed away a while ago, and the apartment was small. It went to my parents." I bit my lip, not wanting to go into details. Technically, that apartment really did go to my parents. But the other 3, the nicer ones, the ones my grandmother had bought back in the day when she was still running her business, those she left to me in her will. No one knew except the notary who handled the paperwork. I'd asked him specifically to keep it confidential for now. "So, nothing," Margaret repeated, eyes wide, like she couldn't believe someone as plain as me could have married her son. "Well, then all good. Samuel, show her the agreement. I took the papers the notary handed me. I skimmed the prenup. In case of divorce, jointly acquired property. Nothing too alarming, except one clause jumped out at me. If one spouse, meaning me, is later found to have significant assets, those assets will be considered joint property unless specifically stated otherwise as premarital. In other words, they were trying to trap me. If it ever came out that I had something valuable, it would automatically count as shared, unless I declared right now that it was mine before the wedding. But if I said I had nothing, then I was signing away everything. I pretended to read the document very carefully. Meanwhile, Margaret kept talking. Nathan's a good boy, but you know how unpredictable life can be. And you, dear, come from a modest background. Why complicate things? That's why we decided to handle this now, to avoid any arguments later. Anger boiled inside me. So, to her, I was just some simple girl, with no name and no status. Fine. But I knew if I told her the truth, that I had 3 apartments rented out and was making a very comfortable monthly income, she'd never let it go. She'd probably demand I sign them over to the family, or at least offer them to relatives at a discount. I didn't want that. Most importantly, I didn't want to ruin things with Nathan. He had no idea I was wealthy, and he truly loved me for me. At least, I believed he did. I need to talk to Nathan first, I said firmly, handing the papers back to the notary. I'm not signing anything without him. Margaret bit her lip but quickly composed herself. Of course, talk to your husband. But I'm sure he agrees with me. This is for your own peace of mind, right, Samuel? The notary nodded awkwardly. He looked at his watch. If we're signing today, we'll need to do it before lunch. I have other meetings after that. Just then, the door creaked open and Nathan stepped into the hallway with a grocery bag. He raised his eyebrows in surprise when he saw his mom and the notary. Mom? What's going on here? He set the bag down and looked straight at me. Victoria, what's happening? I just raised my hand slightly as if to say, don't ask me, I'm just as shocked. That's when Margaret launched into a full explanation for her son, saying she was only trying to look out for his future. She thought it made sense to sign a prenuptial agreement and sort out all the financial matters right away. Nathan listened, his face tense. When she finally finished, he spoke quietly but firmly. Mom, I asked you not to get involved in our relationship. Victoria is my wife, and we'll handle things ourselves. Sweetheart, I'm just trying to, Margaret gasped. Help. I get that, but you didn't tell me you were coming over and bringing a notary. That's too much. Too much. Nathan, how can you not see? These days, you have to be careful. What if Victoria has hidden debts, or worse, some unknown fortune that suddenly comes to light? It's better to sort it all out now. She glanced over at me, as if trying to read my face for clues about this so-called hidden fortune. I did my best to stay calm, even though my heart was pounding. If Victoria has something, I honestly don't care, Nathan finally said. I love her, not her money. And Mom, seriously enough. Margaret pouted, clearly offended, but accepted her defeat. Fine. Do what you want. Samuel, sorry to waste your time. She stood and headed for the door. The notary got up, shrugged awkwardly, and followed her out. I felt such relief when the door finally clicked shut behind them. Nathan came over and hugged me. I'm sorry she acted like that. It's okay, I said, trying to be diplomatic. I get it. She's just worried. She wants you to have stability and security. But deep down, I had already made a firm decision. I wouldn't tell anyone about the 3 apartments. Not yet. Keeping quiet was definitely the right move, I thought. And that's how our married life began, with a not-so-subtle warning shot from my mother-in-law. It was just the beginning of a long and messy family saga. Margaret wasn't planning to back off anytime soon. She was determined to control everything, our family, our finances, even what happened inside our home. Her attitude toward me swung back and forth. One day, she'd be sweet, bringing flowers, inviting us to dinner. The next, she'd lash out, criticizing every little thing I did. To tell this story properly, and believe me, there's a lot more to it, you need to know that every chapter of our family life played out like a scene from a never-ending soap opera. And like any good soap opera, it was all about secrets, drama, and messy emotions. And yes, I had a major secret, the apartments my grandmother left me. But let's go back a bit. My life before Nathan was pretty normal. I grew up in a family of engineers. My dad was an electrician, my mom a design engineer. They both worked at the same factory. We weren't rich, but we got by. I finished school, got into university to study economics, and worked part-time at a small clothing store so I wouldn't have to rely on my parents for money. My family was fairly easygoing, especially my grandmother. She raised me to be independent and confident, always telling me I could achieve anything I set my mind to. My grandmother was a unique woman. Back when times were tough, she and my grandfather did all sorts of side hustles, sewing clothes, trading rare items under the table. It brought in money, but it was risky. When the economy picked up, she started a small business, buying cheap apartments here and there, renting some out, flipping others. She had a sixth sense for real estate and a bit of luck too. Toward the end of her life, she decided to make a will, but she kept it secret from everyone. My parents didn't approve of her past, gray area, business tactics, so their relationship was always strained. But she loved me and trusted me. A week before she passed, already knowing her time was short, she asked me to meet with her notary. There, I signed the documents, making me the sole heir to 3 apartments. The will stated I could only take ownership after her death. After she passed, I followed all the legal procedures and officially inherited the properties. But I didn't tell anyone. There was no need. My parents thought the apartments had been sold or left to someone else. I think my grandmother wanted to avoid drama and infighting, and honestly, I think she was right. She left them to me because she believed I'd manage them wisely and wouldn't let them become the cause of family tension. But the real test of that secret came after I got married. My grandmother had warned me, sharp as ever, that nothing threatens an inheritance more than greedy in-laws. I used to laugh, thinking she was exaggerating. Asterisk greedy? Come on, people aren't like that asterisk, I'd think. They'll understand it's mine, but now, looking at Margaret, I was starting to realize my grandmother was absolutely right. I met Nathan in my 2nd year of university. He was a physics grad student, smart, passionate, and despite being a theoretical physicist, athletic and charming. We became close, started dating. He was incredibly gentle, caring, always joking that I was his muse. I saw how he treated his mother with deep respect. His dad was in the military, often away, so Margaret had raised Nathan on her own, helping him prepare for school and university. He saw her as a saint. So I understood Margaret was a central figure in his life. What I underestimated was just how much she would try to control it. Nathan and I dated for a long time before we decided to get married. Even during the wedding planning, Margaret was overly involved, insisting on how my hair should look, which flowers to pick, where to order the cake. I pushed back, stuck to my vision. The wedding turned out beautiful, but her presence loomed over everything. Still, I didn't argue. I figured what mattered most was love and mutual respect with Nathan. After the wedding, we moved into the apartment his parents had given us. It had actually been bought by his father years ago and was still in his name. It was a nice 2-bedroom place, recently renovated, very comfortable. But I never felt like it was truly ours. His parents still had keys. Margaret would walk in unannounced, claiming she just came by to stop them. You. He smiled. What, did you win the lottery? Or are you asking your parents? Well, I caught myself. I couldn't just blurt out the truth. I might ruin everything. Just a thought. But if we had the means, would you want to move? Yeah, I think I would. I get that this setup doesn't feel right for you, always being watched. But for now, it's just wishful thinking. We're not rich yet. I nodded and said nothing. I thought, what if I just told him about the inheritance? Showed him one of the apartments, said I'd gotten it recently? Maybe it's time to be honest. But then I remembered how much he admired his mother, her constant questions, her unannounced visits, her need to control everything. No, not yet. In any good family drama, timing is everything, and a little mystery never hurts. That's when another character entered the picture, my cousin Elizabeth. She was 27, already divorced, lived on her own, and worked for a big interior design firm. One day she called and said, "Hey, Victoria, I'm going to be near your place for a project. Mind if I stop by for tea?" "Of course, come by," I said, glad for the company. I needed to talk to someone. I hadn't told Elizabeth about the apartments either, but at least she wasn't obsessed with me like Margaret. She came over that evening. We had tea in the kitchen, and she looked around our small but cozy home, asking how things were going after the wedding. I gave her vague answers at first, but then I couldn't hold it in. "Let me ask you something," I said. "Do you think a wife should always tell her husband if she owns something personal?" Elizabeth snorted. "Depends on what it is. If it's a childhood teddy bear, no. But if we're talking real estate or a lot of money, then yeah, in a marriage, honesty matters. Otherwise, there will be drama. What if I'm scared he'll tell his mom?" She laughed. "Oh, that's what this is about. The infamous mother-in-law." "Yeah, I get it. If you want to keep it from her but still be honest with your husband, that's tricky. Maybe you can tell Nathan you have some property, but ask him to keep it private. You think that would work?" "Depends. Is he more loyal to you or his mom? That's what you have to figure out." "So, do you actually have something?" "Just a small thing," I dodged. "A mortgage on a garage," I added randomly, so I wouldn't look too suspicious. Elizabeth shook her head but didn't push. After she left, I kept thinking about what she'd said. Wife wants secrecy. Telling Nathan would mean asking him to keep something from his mother, something serious. And knowing Margaret, that would put him in an impossible position. Wife wants secrecy, mom demands the truth. He'd be stuck in the middle. No, better to wait. All this tension around the inheritance was starting to affect our relationship. Nathan was distant, quiet, coming home with a cloud over his head. One evening, I couldn't take it anymore. "Nathan, what's going on with you? It feels like you're hiding something from me." "There is something," he said, and my blood ran cold. For a second, I thought he already knew about the apartments. "It's Mom. She keeps pressuring me to convince you to sign a prenup. She calls every day, saying it's for the best, but I'm tired of explaining to her that we don't need it. Why won't she let it go?" I said, relieved it wasn't about the secret. "Just tell her we're not planning on getting divorced." I try, but she thinks since you don't come from money, you have nothing to lose, and if we split up, you'll try to take everything. "That's insane." I snapped. "I don't want anything." "I know, but she thinks it's about protecting me and our family." "Maybe I should just sign it," I offered, remembering the clause about declaring assets now. "No," Nathan said, shaking his head. "I don't want that. It doesn't sit right with me. But what if it would at least calm her down?" "It won't. She'll just find something else to obsess over." We hugged. I could feel how torn he was. He loved me, but he didn't want to fight with his mom. And I was caught in my own storm. Should I hide the inheritance or not? Maybe I should just sign the prenup and write down that I have no property. That might get Margaret off my back. But part of me resisted. What if the truth came out later? Would they accuse me of lying? I honestly didn't know what to do. A couple of months had passed since the wedding. Margaret, clearly tired of pushing us directly, decided to change tactics. She started stirring the pot within the family, dragging Nathan's father and a handful of relatives into the mix. Suddenly, there were all these family dinners with aunts and cousins, all dropping subtle hints about how young couples should focus on the greater good, not just their personal desires. At one of these dinners, I felt like I was under a spotlight, every glance slicing right through me. Nathan's Aunt Irene sat across the table, asking strange questions. "Victoria, you studied economics, right? Our whole family's full of engineers, and then there's you, a humanities person." "Yes, I majored in economics," I nodded, knowing full well it wasn't technically humanities, but I didn't feel like correcting her. "So you're good with money. That degree won't go to waste." There was something mocking in her tone. "I hope not. Have you ever thought about using your knowledge to boost the family's income? Like, say, investing in real estate?" I almost choked on my salad when she said real estate. Has Margaret already been whispering her suspicions to Auntie? I thought, trying to stay calm. I answered, "Well, I don't exactly have that kind of capital lying around to jump into real estate. And we just got married, so we're a bit tight on cash." Aunt Irene replied slyly, "But maybe your grandmother left something behind?" I heard she was quite resourceful. "Maybe," Margaret chimed in, "but Victoria claims she didn't inherit anything." I pretended not to notice the bite in her voice and smiled as politely as I could. Oh, if only. I'd invest in the stock market, or maybe buy a little apartment to rent out. But for now, that's just a dream. Nathan sat beside me, growing more and more tense by the minute. It was obvious he hated how his family was cornering me like this. Finally, he'd had enough. "Can we please change the subject? These constant comments about money and grandma's will are getting old. Victoria's my wife. If she doesn't have anything, stop pestering her. And if she does, I'm sure I'd already know." Enough. The room fell into awkward silence. Margaret looked offended. The rest of the relatives started whispering. I felt like the odd one out again, but deep down, I was proud. Nathan had stood up for me. Still, one small victory wasn't enough to win the war. Margaret wasn't done. This time, she launched a whole scheme. One of the apartments I'd inherited from my grandmother was in a high-end part of town. The other two were more modest, but that special one, Grandma had snagged it at a bargain, then paid for a full luxury renovation. I'd been renting it out carefully, always through legal agreements, picking reliable tenants. Then one day, the tenant told me she was moving out. Her circumstances had changed, and she couldn't afford the high rent anymore. I needed to find someone new. Quietly, I reached out to the realtor my grandmother used to work with. He got to work looking for a good match. And then, pure coincidence. Or a setup. I still don't know. Margaret and my father-in-law suddenly started talking about finding a bigger place. They said they had some savings and were exploring options to upgrade. I kept my mouth shut, pretending I had nothing to contribute. Then Nathan said, "Hey Mom, there are some great new places near Madison Avenue. I saw some listings. Might be worth checking out." Madison Avenue? That's an expensive area. Margaret gasped. "Yeah, but it's a good investment if you're thinking of upgrading." I froze. Asterisk, that's exactly where my luxury apartment is. Please don't let them come across my rental listing. Asterisk, I thought, praying my name wouldn't appear anywhere public. But I was too naive. I hadn't considered that the realtor might unknowingly send info to someone who knew me. And that's exactly what happened. He sent a photo of the apartment's gorgeous living room with its big window and park view to a potential renter who apparently shared it with Margaret. She recognized the furniture. Worse, the address. She vaguely remembered that Grandma used to live on Madison Avenue. That was enough to spark suspicion. Still unsure, Margaret asked the friend to schedule a viewing and take her along. They went. The realtor greeted them, led them into the apartment. Margaret immediately recognized the interior, familiar decor, family photos I hadn't yet taken down. She walked through the rooms, soaking in every clue. When they left, she asked the realtor directly, "Who owns this apartment?" "I represent the owner," he said carefully. "We're renting it out legally." But Margaret was relentless. Maybe she offered him a little bonus, or maybe she just wore him down, but eventually he slipped. He told her it belonged to a young woman named Victoria, inherited from her grandmother. That was all Margaret needed. The realtor called me afterward to give me a heads up. "Victoria, a woman came by today asking questions. I didn't give away too much, but she figured out it's your apartment. You might want to be ready for some follow-up." I felt the floor drop out from under me. So, that's it. She knows. And she won't stop at just one. That evening, when Nathan got home, I was sitting in the kitchen, anxious and uneasy. I knew I had to tell him. It was better coming from me than from his mother. She'd twist it any way she wanted. "Nathan, there's something I need to tell you," I began. "I've been putting it off, but I think it's time. I own an apartment. Actually, 3. I inherited them from my grandmother." He froze, his hand still on his coffee mug. "3, he repeated, like he wasn't sure if I was joking. "Yeah, 3. My grandmother was into real estate. When she passed, everything came to me. I didn't say anything because I was afraid your mom would turn it into a problem." "Wow," he said, sitting there in silence. "How long have you known?" "Since she died. It's been about a year. Everything's legal. I rent them out and earn income. Why didn't you tell me before?" Tears welled up in my eyes. "I didn't want to hurt you. I thought you'd understand, but I was scared of how your mom would react. You know how she is. I didn't want her trying to interfere, or demanding I hand anything over, or pushing us to make it part of the family's assets. I just didn't want our relationship to be about money." Nathan stared at me for a moment, then stood up and pulled me into a tight hug. "You're such a fool, Victoria," he said with a relieved smile. "But you're my fool." He paused. "Yeah, I wish you'd told me sooner, but I get it. You're right about my mom, and I'm guessing she's already figured it out, which is why you're telling me now." I nodded and told him the whole story with a realtor. "I see." Nathan sighed. "All right, consider it forgiven, but no more secrets, okay?" "I promise," I said, wiping my tears. "So, what do you plan to do with the apartments? Keep renting them out? We can always use the extra income. Or maybe sell one and finally buy something for ourselves. We'll talk about it." Nathan sat back down, rubbing his temples. "What about my mom? She's going to throw a fit." "Probably. But we'll handle it," I said. He smiled. "Yeah, together, we can handle anything." In that moment, I realized I loved him even more than before. Maybe hiding the inheritance had been a mistake, but at least now we were united against outside pressure. Our bond had grown stronger, if only for that evening. But Margaret wouldn't be Margaret if she gave up that easily. The very next day, she called Nathan and demanded that we come over to their house. She said she had something important to discuss. We already knew that important meant a lecture and most likely more blame thrown my way. Still, we decided to go, just to finally put everything out in the open. When we arrived, Margaret was sitting in the living room with Nathan's dad and, of course, Aunt Irene. Clearly, this was meant to be a family tribunal. We greeted everyone, and I tried to act confident, even though I was shaking inside. Margaret gave me a cold stare and opened with, "Victoria, we found out that you own 3 apartments," she said like an inquisitor unveiling a crime. "And you've been hiding this from us." "Yes, I do," I replied calmly. "So what?" "It's an inheritance, personal property I received before the marriage." "But why did you lie?" Aunt Irene jumped in. "We asked several times, and you said you had nothing." "I didn't lie. I just didn't think I was obligated to tell you," I countered. "It's personal business. I didn't owe anyone an explanation." "Well, now it's out in the open," Nathan's dad said, trying to sound more diplomatic. "Victoria, you have to understand. We're family. Things like this are better shared openly. When I saw how aggressively you were all poking into my and my parents' financial background, I decided silence was safer, I admitted. Yes, it was a mistake, but not a huge one." "Not huge," Margaret snapped. "Don't you see how this reflects on the whole family now? People will think you've been deceiving us or that we're gold diggers." "Mom," Nathan stood up. "What people? Who cares what anyone thinks? This is between me and Victoria, no one else." "No, son, it's not just about you. When you got married, we all became one family. And I don't like that your wife hid 3 apartments. Who knows what else she might be hiding? Maybe she doesn't even plan on having children. Maybe she's just using our family for gain." That was too much. Something inside me snapped. "That's outrageous," I exclaimed. "What a horrible thing to say." Mom, stop. Nathan raised his voice. That's enough. Yes, Victoria owns some property. That's great. Why can't we just be happy that someone in the family is financially secure? Why does it always have to turn into trying to hurt anyone? I love Nathan. The apartments were a gift from my grandmother, and what I do with them is my decision. Nathan and I will figure things out together. Maybe one day we'll use the money to buy a home, or we can live in one of them. Why not? Nathan offered. We're a young couple. Exactly, I nodded. We can live there or rent them out. We'll decide together. I'm ready to handle everything properly, but the apartments are mine. I'm not giving them up. I'm sorry, but that's final. But if you use your inheritance to buy a new home, that home becomes marital property, Margaret interjected, showing off her legal knowledge, which means Nathan has a right to it. So what? I shrugged. He's my husband. Of course I'd share with him. But what I care about most right now is that no one interferes or tells us what to do. Aunt Irene shook her head. Young people these days are all about independence. And that's exactly what we admire, Nathan's dad nodded. A heavy silence followed. Then Margaret exhaled slowly, like she was finally surrendering. Fine. I won't argue anymore. But understand this, in our family, we've always talked things through. I just don't want your secret properties to come between you two later on. We'll deal with it, Nathan replied. Thanks for your concern. And, just like that, the conversation ended. We left shortly after. I caught Margaret watching me with a look of lingering disapproval, but it was clear I wouldn't be bending to her rules, and she would just have to live with that. She wasn't going to stop trying to control us, but I was done playing her game. Life moved on. My career at the consulting firm started to pick up. I got assigned more interesting projects, and my salary was decent. Nathan earned a steady income at the university and took on private tutoring gigs now and then. We were doing well financially. And now that the secret was out, we finally had the freedom to move into one of my apartments and live on our own. No more sharing space with his parents. We chose the most practical one, not the fancy one in the elite district, but the moderately sized, comfortable one that wouldn't draw comments like, oh, look at them living like royalty. We did a bit of light remodeling, spent a couple of months bouncing between his parents and mine, and finally moved in. For me, it felt like a true celebration. Finally, I could be the actual lady of the house. No more dreading the sound of a key in the door that wasn't mine. Nathan was thrilled too, though I could tell deep down he still wondered, why didn't you just tell me? The day came, I tried to explain, because of his mom. He understood, but a part of him still held on to that little sting of hurt. Margaret, on the other hand, was clearly not happy. She called a few times asking, so, when can I come see your new place? I'm curious, you know. I kept dodging her. Oh, the renovation isn't finished. We're too busy. Nathan's working late. But eventually, Nathan said we should just invite her over and be done with it. He believed hiding would only make things worse. We needed to aim for at least a polite peace. So the day came. Margaret arrived, looked around, and as expected, opened with criticism. Well, this place is spacious, Victoria, but isn't it a bit flashy? That furniture looks expensive. It was already here. My grandmother lived here before. She had good taste, I replied, sticking to the truth. And I bet the utility bills are sky high. Are you too sure you can manage? We're managing just fine, Mom. Nathan stepped in. We both work. And have you thought, Victoria, if you have children someday, will this layout work? Maybe it needs to be redesigned. Redesigned? That was news to me. I saw Nathan roll his eyes. He hated it when his mother micromanaged. I kept my tone even. The layout is fine. If we want to, we can turn the other room into a nursery. It's too soon to worry about that. I see. So you're not planning for children yet. I realized this was her next pressure tactic. For Margaret, kids meant more control, telling us how to raise them, what to do. But Nathan and I had already decided we weren't in a rush. We'll decide when the time is right, Nathan said firmly. Let's just have some tea. Margaret pursed her lips but held back. All right, tea it is. I actually came with good intentions. Thought I'd bring you some things for the house, a tablecloth, maybe some curtains. But I figured you've already bought everything. Nathan smiled. Thanks, Mom. We've got it covered. Apparently, she picked up on this subtle message that her offer of gifts, and with them, her quiet presence in our home, had been gently declined. Half an hour later, Margaret gathered her things and left, unable to find a single crack in our new life to wedge herself into. I breathed a quiet sigh of relief. Time went on. Things between Nathan and me were good. He teased me sometimes. So, millionaire, how much did you rake in from rent today? And laugh. I'd smile and shoot back, better question. How many academic papers did you publish? Those little jokes showed how well we'd come to understand each other. But the peace didn't last long. As it turned out, Margaret had another plan up her sleeve, this time to rope me into their family business. After retiring from the military, Nathan's father had started a small transportation company. They owned a few trucks and handled deliveries. Margaret helped with the books and wanted to grow the business. And for that, they needed investment. And where better to get money than from Victoria? After all, she had 3 apartments and rental income. Why let that go to waste? We're all family, they must have thought. One day Nathan's dad stopped by and said, "Victoria, hear me out. We've got a great idea. We want to invest in a new truck, hire some more drivers, grow the business. It'll bring in good profit. You'd get a share of the earnings." "That sounds interesting," I replied politely, not wanting to offend him, but I'm not ready to invest in the transport business. I don't know the field, and I'm not comfortable risking my savings without guarantees. "But it's a family business," he said, raising an eyebrow, "and I'm giving you my word. We are reliable people." "I don't doubt that," I said carefully, "but business can be unpredictable. We're just now settling into our own place, and we need funds for future expenses. For now, I'd rather not invest big sums." Unlike Margaret, my father-in-law was more reasonable. He simply nodded and said, "I understand, but if you change your mind, you know where to find us." But the very next day, Margaret called. "Victoria, what was that conversation with my husband? You refused to invest?" "Yes," I confirmed. "I'm not ready to invest in something like that. But we're family. Is that how you treat your own?" "I'm not obligated to fund every project someone suggests just because we're related." "Of course not, but families help each other. I'll help if someone's seriously ill or in a real emergency. But putting money into a business that might fail, that's not charity." Our door with a notary again. This time I'll be ready. With paperwork, boundaries, and all the confidence I need to protect what's mine. Because life has taught me one thing: everything emotional and material should be protected, both legally and personally. That's how you make sure no surprise relatives with papers can ever shake your peace again. I look at my little son, peacefully sleeping in his crib, and think, may he grow up surrounded by love, free from any sort of family manipulation. Nathan and I will do everything we can to make sure he feels happy and secure. And as for my apartments? Maybe one day, when he's grown, one of them will give him a head start in life. That'll be my gift to his future. But that's another story. So that's how it all turned out. The beginning of our marriage was loud and messy, like something straight out of a family drama. Accusations, notaries, family interventions, arguments about money and inheritance. But we made it through. And the moral of this long story is simple: love each other, trust each other, but never let even your closest relatives cross your personal boundaries. And if you have an inheritance, be prepared. Someone will come for it. Still, if you've got someone by your side who truly loves you and stands with you, even the most persistent notary won't scare you. That's my story. No magic, no miracles, just real life, raw emotions, drama, and in the end, strong love. And so I wrap up this tale about how sometimes keeping quiet can be your greatest protection. I look at my now 2-year-old son and can't help but smile at how curious and clever he's becoming. When Paul was still tiny, lying in that crib, I thought the hardest part was behind us. We had defended our independence, we'd carved out our own space, dealt with the inheritance, and created a stable family life. But life, as always, had new twists in store, and our family saga kept unfolding. Still no magic, but plenty of emotional ups and downs. At first, things were relatively calm. We were enjoying parenthood. Nathan was enthusiastically buying toys and books, and I was juggling work and household chores. My parents, who lived in another part of the city, helped with Paul when I asked. They were respectful and didn't intrude on our life. Only Margaret continued to drop by unannounced. Spotting a pile of laundry or scattered toys, she'd launch into a new round of judgment. "Victoria, really? A child could trip over these cars. And when's the last time you mopped the floor?" She'd scowl, scanning the living room cluttered with Paul's things. "We're fine, Mom," Nathan would say, trying to distract her from my housekeeping crimes. "Paul likes it here. It's his space, and anyway, we just got back from a walk, didn't have time to clean up yet." Honestly, compared to the time she showed up with a notary or demanded money for a business, these little complaints barely registered. We were used to them. We'd think to ourselves, whatever. At least she's not poking around in our finances, but it soon became clear her ideas about money, business, and inheritance hadn't disappeared. She just hit pause, and now she was gearing up for the next round, this time with a new angle. Nathan and I had been toying with the idea of selling one of my remaining apartments and buying a house closer to nature. It would be great for Paul to have space to play outdoors, not just around the apartment block. And I had to admit, I dreamed of a big yard with flowers and a patio for family dinners. Nathan liked the idea but hesitated. Moving to the suburbs would mean sacrificing convenience, longer commutes, more driving for school runs. "We're not talking about some remote village," I argued. "There are suburbs with good infrastructure, schools, shops, buses, and peace and fresh air." In the end, we decided to hold off. Instead, we focused on upgrading our current place to make it more comfortable for Paul. We turned one room into a proper kid's room, bright wallpaper, toys, bookshelves. Everything felt like it was falling into place. Then Margaret showed up again. This time, she didn't come alone. With her was a woman I'd never seen before, maybe in her 40s. Victoria, this is Gabrielle Peterson, a longtime family friend. Margaret introduced her guest, not bothering to explain what exactly made her a family friend. She's a realtor, works in real estate. We thought you might need her help. Help? I frowned slightly as I took their coats. Why would I need a realtor all of a sudden? Well, you do own 3 apartments, Margaret said with an overly sweet voice that dripped with fake concern. Maybe Gabrielle can help you manage those assets. Then, she raised her voice slightly as if making some grand announcement. Maybe you two could discuss selling one of them and investing in something promising. I tensed. This was sounding all too familiar, like their old pitch about the transport business. Thanks, but I'll handle my properties myself, I said, still polite but feeling the irritation rise. I already work with someone I trust. Gabrielle's excellent. Margaret insisted. And who knows, maybe you'll even want to expand. Buy a 4th property. Now it was obvious she'd brought Gabrielle to nudge me towards some scheme, maybe another attempt to rope me into one of her investment ideas. Margaret, let's do this. I'm always open to new people, but if I ever decide to buy or sell, I'll let you know. For now, we're not planning any deals, I said as calmly and politely as I could. Gabrielle gave a pleasant smile. Of course. No pressure. If you ever need anything, Margaret has my number. They left about 10 minutes later. Margaret looked so bitter you'd think I had just ruined a $1 million deal. I just smirked to myself. Back at it again. I hadn't even had time to relax when Nathan came home and saw the look on my face. Let me guess, your mom with a realtor this time, trying to get me to do some deal? I'm sure she's still hoping I'll invest in their business. Unbelievable. Nathan rubbed his face wearily. I'll talk to her. She needs to stop bringing strangers into our home. Talk to her he did, but Margaret's stubbornness was unshakable. She complained to her husband, to Aunt Irene, to every relative in earshot that I was closed off, unwilling to listen. I just shrugged. Let them talk. As long as they stayed out of my business. Then, unexpectedly, my sister Elizabeth stepped into the picture. She'd been living her own life and didn't usually get involved, but she'd heard about the latest stunts from Margaret and gave me a call. Victoria, have you thought more about buying a house? I'm working on an architectural project right now. If you want to build something from scratch, maybe we can do it together. I like the idea, I said, but I'm afraid it'll set Margaret off again. She'll think I'm choosing to invest in a house instead of their business. Oh, forget what she thinks, Elizabeth. It's your money, your inheritance, your life. The more I thought about it, the more I realized she was right. And slowly, the idea started taking root. Maybe it was time to stop worrying about what Margaret might say and start building the life we actually wanted. A house with a big living room, a fireplace, and a garden for Paul. But before we could make any decisions, a new wave of drama hit. This time, not about money, but parenting. Paul was growing into a lively, energetic little boy. When he turned 3, we enrolled him in a great nearby preschool. And right away, Margaret turned on her watchdog mode. Are you sure that place is good? I heard the teachers are strict. They don't even take the kids outside that much. Wouldn't it be better if he went to the preschool near us so I could pick him up? I calmly explained. Nathan looked into it, and the reviews are excellent. It's close to our place. Driving him across the city doesn't make sense. Why not? I could drive him. Nathan quickly shut that down. Mom, Victoria and I already made the decision. It's done. Thankfully, she didn't push that time. But soon, she found a new angle. She started insisting Paul needed special developmental classes, maybe a tutor to start reading early. I tried to stay polite, saying we'd decide ourselves when Paul was ready to start learning letters. No need to force academic pressure on a 3-year-old. But Nathan was already stacking letter blocks at his age, she exclaimed. I thought to myself, asterisk, so Paul stacks blocks too. What's the problem? Asterisk, but she kept going. If only I could take charge of Paul's development. I've always had a knack for teaching. I smiled and said, I don't think you'd have the patience to turn him into a genius. This kind of chatter continued all summer while Paul adjusted to preschool. Every visit, Margaret found something new to criticize, something we were doing wrong, something Paul was missing out on. Thankfully, Nathan stayed calm and shut down most of her remarks, and I'd learned to let her complaints roll right off me. Then suddenly, my health took a hit. I had to step back from work and even ask my parents to help take care of Paul. It all happened so fast. I started feeling constantly exhausted. My lower back and stomach hurt. Doctors found some gynecological issues, and I had to undergo surgery. Thankfully, it wasn't anything critical, and within a month, I was back on my feet. But that period really shook up our family life. First of all, Margaret suddenly tried to step into the role of primary caregiver. She showed up at our place and said, Victoria, You've got surgery coming up. You can't take care of the house or the baby. I'll move in and take control of everything. As soon as I heard move in, I froze. No way. I was grateful for the offer, but I knew perfectly well that given the chance, Margaret would start rearranging furniture and running the household her way. Nathan tensed up too. Mom, that's way too much. Victoria's parents already said they'd help out, and I'm going to take some time off. I'll be home while she recovers. If we need extra support, we'll call. Margaret got offended. Right? I see. I'm not welcome anymore. Don't come crying to me when you need a pair of helping hands. I was worried Nathan might cave, but he didn't. He stood firm that his mother wouldn't be living with us. Besides, I was an adult, not helpless, and the surgery wasn't so serious that I'd be out of commission for months. In the end, I recovered in peace, spending a couple of weeks at my parents' place, so I didn't have to worry about cooking or cleaning. Paul stayed with Nathan or came to visit me. My dad would bring him over. My mom handled all the chores, and I just rested. Want me to get you more vitamins? She asked one evening as I sat quietly in an armchair reading. I've got everything the doctor prescribed, I smiled. I just need time and rest. Margaret clearly wasn't happy her heroic help wasn't needed. From a distance, she started complaining to Nathan over the phone. Oh, so your wife's mother is more important now? And I'm no one, I guess. Nathan kept trying to reason with her. Mom, come on. It's just more comfortable for Victoria over there. She doesn't have to adapt to someone else's place. It's her childhood home. Let's not turn this into a fight. Margaret begrudgingly dropped it, but clearly didn't let it go. Soon enough, she found a new way to express her discontent. By the time I came back home fully recovered, Margaret's family council had apparently made a new decision. Her husband, Aunt Irene, and some random relatives decided our son, Paul, needed to spend more time with extended family to be properly raised. Apparently, I was lacking in traditional values. They started talking about it openly. Let's take Paul to our country house on the weekends. He should get used to being around his extended family. Sure, the repairs aren't finished yet, but it's basically a summer home. He could bond with his uncles and aunts there. I stayed polite but firm. Thank you, but Paul's still too little to be away from us for long. He's not used to your house, and everything's new to him there. Besides, we enjoy spending weekends with him ourselves. Of course, Margaret didn't like that answer. This is just selfish parenting. It's good for kids to have a change of environment. And you don't mind him visiting your parents? Why block him from seeing his paternal grandmother? I had to remind her that there's a big difference between a couple of hours at grandma's and a full weekend away in an unfamiliar place. I wasn't even sure the house was safe. Last I'd heard, the roof needed work, and there were issues with the electricity. And with her husband still trying to fix his failing business, I doubted they had the means to make the place kid-friendly. But Margaret wouldn't budge. You're insulting our whole family. You don't think we're capable of taking care of a child? We want Paul to grow up trusting all his relatives. Nathan saw that I was about to lose my temper and stepped in. Mom, we're not against visits, but Paul's still more comfortable with us. Let's give it time. When he's older, maybe 5 or so, we can talk about weekends away. That ended the conversation for the time being, but I knew it wasn't over. I could see it in Margaret's eyes. She was already plotting her next move, still determined to prove she was the one who called the shots in this family. While all this drama was playing out, my sister Elizabeth was climbing the career ladder in interior design. One evening she called, full of excitement. Victoria, you won't believe it. I'm working on a premium suburban development. They're going to start selling lots and houses soon. Pricey, but the area is amazing. You and Nathan ever think about investing in something like that? It got me thinking. We were happy with our apartment, but long-term, I'd always dreamed of having a house, at least for weekends and holidays. I brought it up with Nathan. Let's check it out. See where it is and what the prices are, he said. If it looks promising, maybe we buy a lot and build later. We went to see it. It was about an hour outside the city, surrounded by forest, near a river. Clean air. Margaret somehow found out the apartment was up for sale. She showed up fuming. Victoria, what is this I hear? You're selling your apartment and didn't even consult us. Why would I? It's my property, I replied coolly. But we're family. And I have an idea. Invest the money in our trucking business. We've started rebuilding, bought a couple of used trucks, but we need one more brand new. The profits will be yours. I sighed inwardly. So predictable. Sorry, Margaret, but Nathan and I already decided to buy a lot in a new housing development. That's more important for our family than another truck. Out of moves, she tried playing the guilt card with Nathan. Son, are you even thinking straight? That area doesn't even have a preschool or clinic. Maybe talk some sense into your wife. Mom, this is our decision, Nathan said, trying to stay calm. We've thought it through. One day, we'll build a house. It's a long-term project for us. You'd be better off putting that money toward Paul's education abroad, she shot back. That house will just end up half-built and abandoned. I realized then there was no point trying to reason with her. Sure, we didn't know yet how we'd fund the construction, but just knowing we'd have a piece of land and the option to live outside the city gave us peace of mind. I stood firm. We've made our decision. The sale is nearly finalized. The money will go straight into the land. Margaret went quiet, then muttered, "You'll regret this," and slammed the door on her way out. We sold the apartment and bought the lot. Now we just needed to figure out when to start building. We weren't in a rush. We wanted Elizabeth's help with the design, time to save up, and to avoid living in the middle of a half-dug foundation. Everything was going pretty smoothly until Margaret hit us with an unexpected move. She decided to drag my parents into the drama. One day I got a call from my mom. "Victoria, Margaret just called. She asked us to talk some sense into you. Said you're about to make a huge mistake with your inheritance." "And what did you say?" I asked, already clenching my fists. "I told her you're smart and can make your own decisions." But she wasn't happy. She said that if the money's going toward land, then clearly you don't care about helping their family. I almost laughed. What? Nathan and Paul don't count as part of her family if we're talking about building a future home? But I wasn't laughing for long. It was clear Margaret was now trying to recruit allies, even pressuring my side of the family. "Mom, don't worry. I've got everything under control. Margaret's just stressed because of their business problems. She wanted me to give her the money for trucks, but you know, it's my money, my life." "Of course, sweetheart. Don't worry, we're with you." That helped me calm down a bit, but inside, a quiet fury was building. I really wanted to shut Margaret down once and for all so she'd never try to pull this again. Still, I kept myself in check. I knew an open confrontation wouldn't bring us peace. The next day, Nathan suggested, "How about we invite both our parents to dinner? A nice restaurant. Try to smooth things over, show everyone we're all about respect, and maybe end these silly power plays." "You really think it'll work?" I asked, skeptical. "I don't know, but maybe it'll take the edge off. They'll still be seeing each other at birthdays and holidays." We booked a table at a quiet restaurant and invited both couples. My parents arrived first and took their seats. Then came Margaret and my father-in-law. She walked in like a queen ready to declare war. To his credit, her husband smiled and greeted everyone kindly. The conversation started with the usual: health, the weather, Paul's progress at preschool. Then it shifted to work, who was doing what these days. I hoped we could tiptoe around the money and real estate stuff, but of course Margaret raised her glass of wine, squinted, and said, "Well then, let's drink to the day when everyone in this family finally learns to trust each other and stops hiding profitable deals and future plans." Nathan and I exchanged looks. My parents stayed politely silent, clearly not wanting to get dragged into drama. I turned to Margaret and said as calmly as I could, "Margaret, I hope you're not implying that anyone here is hiding things on purpose. We've already cleared everything up." "Well, you never ask for advice," she said, shaking her head. "Do we need to consult people on every decision?" Nathan stepped in. "You and Dad run your business however you like. You don't check with us first." His father nodded. "Nathan's right. We make our own choices, and so should you too, Margaret. Let's admit, they're grown-ups now." Margaret sighed heavily, took a sip of wine, and then turned to my mom. "Catherine, what do you think? Is it normal for a family to make big decisions without consulting anyone?" My mom smiled. "I think people ask for advice when they trust someone and want to hear their opinion. But demanding that someone consult you? That's too much. The kids will figure it out on their own." It was obvious Margaret didn't like that answer, especially because it supported my side. But she held it together and said, "Fine, let's not ruin the evening. Hopefully, we'll learn to work as a team someday." I breathed a silent sigh of relief, thinking maybe the storm was calming. We carried on with dinner, laughed about funny stories from the past, and talked about Paul. Things seemed more relaxed. But as we were saying goodbye, Margaret came up to me and whispered, "You think I'm just going to back off?" "No. My family is my family, and you don't get to ignore our problems. We'll talk again." A chill ran down my spine, but before I could respond, she was already heading to the coat check. Nathan shot me a questioning look, like, "What did she say?" I just shrugged. Same old song. We headed home. I was seething inside, but didn't want to show it in front of Nathan and escalate things. He noticed I was tense and said, "I can tell my mom did something again." "I'm sorry. She just can't accept that you're independent. But these are our choices. We have every right." "I know," I said. I try not to react anymore, but honestly, I'm exhausted. Feels like she'll never stop. That night I couldn't sleep. My mind was racing. This wasn't over. Margaret still had one tool left, using Paul as leverage and trying to control how we planned his future. I had a strong feeling another round of manipulation was coming. And I was right. A few months later, after we finalized the land purchase and I started scouting architects, besides Elizabeth, who had offered to help with plans, I got a call from Paul's preschool director. "Hi, Victoria. I wanted to touch base. Your son's grandmother stopped by recently. She asked us to give Paul extra attention." I just wanted to clarify how we should respond to that. I froze. Which grandmother? I believe it was Margaret. She said she wants to attend his classes, monitor his development, and bring in educational materials. I nearly laughed at how ridiculous it sounded. But inside, I was fuming. Now she was interfering at school. I see. Let's be clear. We don't mind if Paul's grandmother attends open events or celebrations if that's allowed, but we don't want any special treatment for him. He should be treated just like the other kids. The director agreed and apologized for the inconvenience. I immediately called Nathan. Did your mom seriously go to Paul's preschool and start making demands? What? Nathan was furious. I had no idea. I'm calling her right now. Later, he told me Margaret had tried to set up private lessons for Paul and even wanted to sit in on them herself. The director had refused, explaining it went against school policy. Margaret then insisted they focus more on reading with Paul and handed over books she brought from home. Nathan had a talk with her and told her to stop doing things behind our backs. Her reaction was exactly what we expected. I was only trying to do what's best for my grandson. You're bad parents if you don't support his advanced learning. We just looked at each other. What advanced learning? He's 3.5. He's